MZ boy, demon, God.
My grandfather? He was a very large, strong and burly man. He worked on the fields from the early hours of the morning until late into the night. And he also tended to his animals. You know, the usual ones: chickens, pigs, goats and horses. He treated them like they were his best friends. This was his way of life. He knew of no breaks. He always had something to do. Always. I remember staying over at my grandparents' house one late summer. It was a modest, brick-built house, built by my grandfather. Although he made plans for it, there were no bathrooms or showers indoors, running water gone as far as the kitchen sink, and if you needed to do either one of the two numbers, then it was either the chamber pot or a long walk to the outhouse, past the barn, where the horses were kept. The barn was attached to the house. The doors were always open, so you could see the horses inside. At night you could hear the thumping of the horses' hooves echoing through the wall, like they were sending a signal to say, "We're still here." Or perhaps a warning for danger. I didn't like going to the toilet at night. It was terrifying. The village was dark, like it had something to hide. People barely left their homes at night, unless they were drunks who were making their way home from the local kochma, which is the equivalent of a pub. The farmhouse my grandparents lived in was equally as dark as the rest of the village. There were only two sets of lights outside the house. One right above the door that led into the kitchen, one of two entrances to the house, and one a little bit further up, near the second pantry, which barely lit up its entrance. The daunting thought of walking to the end of the garden with only a flashlight and sit in the cold outhouse was not inviting, but neither was the thought of crouching over a pot. But this one night, I just couldn't hold it any longer. As I stepped outside through the kitchen door, I began hearing the horses whining and thumping as they were startled by something. Something terrifying. Shiver ran through my spine. What could have made them so upset? Did a fox get in? Did a local drunkard stumble in? I remember seeing one outside the pub when I walked through the village with my parents one late afternoon. I remember locking eyes with the man and that scared me. As I slowly shuffled forward towards the steps that led down to the end of the garden, the pantry light began flickering, and it went dark. I immediately switched on the flashlight, which I was carrying in my hand. I looked around to see if I could spot anything. Did I see a shadow move? Was it an animal or something else? The horses were crying even louder than before. Then I heard my grandfather's booming voice.
Don't go back.
He shouted. I raised my flashlight to see where my grandfather is. But then I realized he's not talking to me. I realized he's in the barn. I shuffled closer and closer to the steps. By this point, my stomach was in my mouth. My heart was beating so fast, I thought I was going to faint. I kept hearing my grandfather shouting, "Stop, go back." Then he begins chanting words that my young head could not understand. I prayed before. I've been to church. I know the words to our prayers, but this was something different. I was terrified, but my curiosity wouldn't leave me. I kept hearing. But when I reached the doors to the barn, I saw my grandfather. his face lit by an oil lantern, looked frightened beyond belief. He looked like he had been in a fight. Sweat running down his withered face, he was holding on for his dear life. I didn't think he had seen me. Then his big, booming voice echoed once more through the darkness of the night.
Stop! Go back!
All the other animals then began to whine, cluck, screech, and the pigs squealed, sounded as they were being burned alive. And the chickens in the coop were flapping their wings so erratically that in the chaos, a large cloud of feathers had escaped through the wires. With trembling legs, I rushed past the door of the barn, past my grandfather. He briefly looked at me and his voice boomed,
Don't look, just go.
Then I saw it. A large body, not of a horse, but something much bigger, standing on its hind legs. It had large dark torso covered in what looked like wet hair, its arms skinny with long fingers stretching out. I was frozen, felt rooted, paralyzed. I had no other thoughts, only sadness and fear. And then I heard my grandfather again.
Leave him be. Stop and go back, you devil!
And I suddenly could feel my legs again. So I ran, and I ran as fast as my legs could take me, and I ran straight to the outhouse and closed myself in. That's the last thing I remember. Then I woke up. I can see the sun peering in behind the curtains. The cockerel just sang its morning call. I see my parents still asleep in the bed across from mine. Was this all a dream? A nightmare? Or did what happened last night? Was it real? I quickly put on my shoes and I run out to the barn, past my nan in the kitchen, through the doors, past the pantry. Then I see something that I have never seen before. The doors to the barn were closed. The barn doors were never closed. The barn's doors were never locked. But today, after that night, they're locked. And the door had runes painted on it with what looked like red paint. I thought it was red paint. I looked over at my grandfather. He looked like he had not slept at all. I was about to ask him if what I had experienced was real, but he just walked past me, quickly brushed my hair with his hand, and walked into the kitchen to have breakfast, and that was it. Many years later, I asked my mom if she ever saw the runes on the barn door, if she knew what they meant. And this is what she said. Her father never let her near the barn, but she had seen the runes, and it was definitely not paint.